Hello and welcome back. I'm delighted to be joined again by Sarah Calcutt, Non-Executive Board Director of Covent Garden Market Authority and the Rural Payments Agency, and a fifth-generation farmer, having farmed in Kent for over 200 years. And we're going to continue our conversation around the challenges facing the food sector and the impact on food security for the United Kingdom and many of the clients and businesses that we work with. Sarah, delighted to have you here today. Welcome.
Thank you, Mark.
In your experience with your role in the marketing authorities and obviously with the RPA, but primarily dealing with these traders and the people that supply the markets in London, what is the feel on the ground at the minute? Are people coming to you for solutions? Are they just thinking this is just impossible to trade? Are they having to just hike their prices up? And are you seeing a reaction? Are they seeing a reaction in demand from the people that are historically their loyal customers? Is that now seeing a shift?
There's a change in every way. So the team at the Market Authority, we have there's a really fantastic senior leadership team in there now. And these guys have been working very closely with the tenants, with our developers. Of course, we're still midpoint development. We are 500 and something weeks through redeveloping the site at present. And so there's plenty of challenges in there. Talking with the tenants, they're not making margin. They're certainly not seeing the profits that they used to have. They're seeing a reduction in their customer base because hospitality is really, really suffering. Those that are still surviving in hospitality, they're reducing their service, they're reducing their menu, and they're really struggling to pay for the historical gear with the ingredients that they would have had. Covent Garden, of course, is where all the really high quality product goes into. It's dealing with the top end of London hospitality, but also a lot of food service contracts out of there, and a lot of care homes, a lot of schools. Yeah. So there's a very wide range of customers, but at every stage in that customer journey through the market, there are real price pressures.
With that point about the servicing of the high-end hospitality, so the hotels, the high-end restaurants, that whole retail and consumer industry, which links directly into the chain, I suppose, food chain, has there been a shift or has it been largely static? Because that's the higher end. So
there has been a shift. You're not seeing as many. I think about, so the challenge is that you're not seeing as many outlets opening. So we're not seeing the change at the top end of hospitality that we have, we maybe would have done perhaps pre-COVID. And what you are seeing is, unfortunately, the announcements where people are either consolidating their groups or they're closing their high end. So you've lost some quite big names in London hospitality. Some real flagship restaurants have gone over the last few years. And what we're not seeing is the uptick in other groups. So we're seeing low-level growth, where they're part of they're a VC construct and they've got a really big company behind them, and they have a managed menu which is manufactured off-site. What you're not seeing is that in-house meal creation to a refined menu.
So how do you think then that business, whether it's sort of family farms, which, either the small or the more substantial ones that are, multi-sited, if I may, versus the businesses that are caught within the chain, so they may be supplying high-end restaurants or organisations that then supply the high-end restaurants and they provide the raw product. So they're caught between the upstream and the downstream, if you like, within the chain. What should they be doing now to try and mitigate some of these shocks? Should they be coming together more effectively? Should they be, you just mentioned about consolidation. What else should they be doing? Should they be looking at sustainability from a different lens? What is the potential impact of this? Because everything's not going to go back to normal next week, is it?
No, not even slightly, because your fertiliser being manufactured for next year's crop will be affected because the inputs will be very expensive. Now you've still got you'll have supply chain issues where everything's being caught up. So you're going to see supply chain disruption. If it stopped tomorrow, you still have another 3-4 months worth of supply chain disruption as well, which economically will impact on next year as well as this year, of course. For the small businesses, I mean, one of the things that you and I have seen in our time in the industry is this removal of the traditional multi-cropped unit into a monoculture. So you've got so many farms. When my dad took over the family farm, it was growing cherries, plums, black currants, red currants, apples, pears, hops. And so you had a seven chances of getting it right each year. So you had 7 opportunities of profit when something didn't work. And where we've come to over the last sort of 20 years of farming is that somebody will be only growing one crop. Yeah. So you'll be a hop farm. You won't be, there are some notable hop and apple growers. And so they can hedge their risk. And I think a return to farms having multi-streams of income, as opposed to being, determined by what happens with the combine this year. There's those sort of side of things. There has to be the energy production. It's very complicated to start talking about regen techniques because we still don't have measurement of their impact. But also there is potential, I feel, coming down the tracks for income from improved carbon sequestration in farming. So it's looking at different ways and also look at the RPA support schemes. We're not meant, of course, to consider it as being an income stream. It is payment for goods received, but there is something in there that is going to help you invest in your technology too. There's the Farm and Collaboration Fund. There's all sorts of bits in there which actually will benefit people and hopefully help buffer them against some of the shocks.
Mm-hmm. They say that every crisis becomes an opportunity or should be potentially perceived as an opportunity. And is it fair to say then that perhaps this whole situation that's happened over the last 3 weeks is almost act as an accelerant to turn around and say, we need to continue or raise the importance of dealing with the situation in the food sector? I know there's been discussions over the last couple of years, and a month doesn't go by, then some report gets issued by some body, and there's numerous bodies for everything. But the fact that it's so punitive at the minute and the change has been so profound is that you just mentioned diversification from the monocrop position to a more of a balanced portfolio through to the consolidation of sites and looking at ways in which things have been done historically from a fuel cost perspective. But is this not now then basically businesses can look at their whole risk portfolio and say, you know what, should we be looking at things completely differently? Because is this world going to change and everything go back to normal? Certainly not for at least, you're saying, 6 months. And then potentially the impact of this is going to last for years because of your earlier point at the beginning to do with the impact of planting seasons and cycles, right? Which then has an impact up further down the chain in terms of the multiples, the manufacturers, and then what we effectively export.
Yeah. Resilience requires capacity. Yeah. And one of the massive challenges we've got at the moment is we have, particularly in farming, we have an industry that doesn't have the capacity to be able to change what it's doing because change requires investment. You've got a real challenge in terms of the UK doesn't have food resilience and it doesn't have energy resilience security. We don't have any other avenues to go down. So I've been involved in a very interesting piece of work with Kate Cooper in Birmingham, where we've been looking at scenario planning in the future should our current geopolitical situation escalate, should our climate challenge situation escalate, and actually what we would do as a society. And it worries me because I can see strands of what we've been discussing in this long focus. We've been looking 50 years into the future, and we've been looking at these, and I can see strands of it happening now. The big problem now, the basic line is that farming and food doesn't make money. Most of the population can't afford the diet they could have done 10, 15, 20 years ago. And economically, we're struggling. We don't have power security, we don't have food security. My real concern and my reason for joining the board at the RPA and everything that I'm working on at the moment is to hopefully be part of solutions, because at the moment it is quite hard to see the direction forward. There's some great foundations being written into policy right now, which is about a long-term strategy about how, particularly around food, it is the equivalent of the Beveridge Act, which took us through the Second World War and took us through farming policy into the 80s. But it takes a while to embed that. In the meantime, it's going to be hard.
I think on that note, is it fair to say that you can almost summarize this by saying that businesses need to redefine what their medium-term strategy looks like. They need to look at their stress testing, they need to look at their risk appetite, and they need to look at, strangely, consolidation with a position to diversify if they're single crop entities, and also then protect themselves from the potential downstream pressure from the people further up the chain, which is going to then impact on their ability to make a profit.
You mentioned, risk appetite. It's difficult because in a business sense and in corporate planning sense, risk appetite is everything. How risk averse are you? The challenge in farming is that you do it because it's what's in your blood, and you do it because of this is your heritage. There's an immense amount of guilt, and well documented challenges around mental health with the guilt going, are you the generation to stop?
Yeah.
I carry massive guilt because I'm not farming. Our farm wasn't big enough to support 2 households. And actually, in the end, we had to sell quite a lot of it. So I carry guilt because I'm not farming and we're not doing what my ancestors did. And I look at my peers, they wouldn't understand money. Some of them wouldn't understand the conversation around risk appetite, but what they do understand is the fear factor. And they do understand how much they fear that they will have to change so much it's unrecognisable, and therefore it doesn't become a fulfilling career. And that's going to be a big challenge for the sector. I'm sure you've probably read the Batter's farm profitability review. Now, Manette's report is feeding into the farming roadmap. Now, that is going to be acknowledging the huge challenge around risk and around future planning in farming, because you will get people that are already planning to reduce their area, planning to change the nature of their businesses. With the changes in inheritance tax, it tends to be those that are now within that threshold, so they won't be affected by the change, but it has made them more think about, is there another generation who wants to do this? And I think a lot of it will be a catalyst for change.
I think that on that point, I think all businesses that both MHA work with and the wider Baker Tilly Global Network, we are always here to help and talk about some of the challenges that Sarah just alluded to, but also as well from a global and more wider geopolitical perspective. We're seeing some significant shifts, both from some of the work we're doing at the FTSE 100 level and FTSE 250 level, but also as well with our work with regulators and governments. So, Sarah, thank you for your time, and please do watch, and also please do look out for our next in a series looking at the challenges to do with food security and the geopolitical shocks coming out of what is quite a difficult time for many businesses at the moment. And if you would like to learn more, please do contact us through www.mha.co.uk. Thank you very much.